What sparked the idea for the story Wretch?
Well, it was a culmination of things. There's certain books that fall into the category of the old slogan writers are given, which is write what you know. And in the past, with certain titles I've published, there's some things I know and some things I don't know. In the case of Wretch, and by the way, the things I don't know, I make sure I do a lot of research on so I get it as right as possible for the reader. And with Wretch, I really wrote what I know from certain experiences in my life. Not to mention, the story takes place in Chicago. So I'm born and raised in Chicagoland, and I know it well. I've published some short stories that took place in Chicago before, but I never did a novel in Chicago. So with Wretch, I had a couple ideas for what I wanted to write about, like who characters were, what they would do. And relative to the characters in talking about writing what I know or my real life experiences, in this novel, the characters and some other things are related to actual experiences I had. And I mentioned some of this at the end of the book in my afterword. And with the protagonist, Detective Donnie Lynch, I wanted the main character to be a police detective. There's been numerous friends and some family that have been police officers and whatnot. And I met this great retired police detective from Chicago named Peter Kokonis. I call him Sergeant Pete. And he had worked for the CPD, Chicago Police Department, I think for 35 years, quite some time. And he had done it all from starting out as a beat cop on the street to detective to internal affairs, organized crime, gang task force work, all kinds of stuff. So I had what you would call like an actual cop from Chicago who isn't corrupt and, rolls with the times too, with the CPD. I spent some time with that retired police detective interviewing him and also hitting the streets of Chicago to really see some things, what it's like out there, and also to get a vibe of what it's like to be a police officer. So that point of view is really important to me, and that was an idea that came to me, to have a detective as the main protagonist. And then for the antagonists, there's basically two of them. The main one, Derek Hoffman, he's a 6'5", steroid abusing sociopath, super violent, roid rage kind of thing. And he was actually loosely based on a guy I knew when I was in my 20s. And this guy was what you would call an amateur pro wrestler. So if you think about like the major leagues and the minor leagues in baseball, he was like in the minor leagues of professional wrestling. And this guy was really big. He was 6'1" probably. And I remember he was kind of like a wannabe bodybuilder. He worked out a lot. He took steroids and he fit that niche of what, and anyone's read about, the negative side of steroids, the roid rage, the temper. And I witnessed that firsthand, a person like that. So Derek Hoffman, my character, was drawn from, meeting that acquaintance way back when I was in my 20s. You're talking like 1991, 92. There's that. And then also the other antagonist is a Chicago mafia patriarch, kind of like a Vito Corleone from The Godfather in Chicago. And in Chicago, the mob is known as the Outfit. So this guy, his name's Tico, the meat grinder Tortellio, and he is the head of the Tortellio crime family, the head of the Outfit in Chicago. I've met, again, what some might call unsavory characters. I remember at my old job, he used to be the head of shipping, like a logistics manager. So I dealt with a lot of trucking companies in Chicago. And over time, and you're talking again, I'm going back to the 90s into, the mid to late 2000s, probably up till 2009 or something like that, or eight. Some of these trucking companies back in the day were owned by organized crime guys. I've met them and had to use their trucking companies and stuff. And I'm also fascinated by organized crime. I always have been, on a nonfiction level. It's like true crime, serial killers, organized crime, those kind of books always fascinated me. And then again, just, meeting some, I call them wannabe gangsters back in the day, that all inspired me for these main characters. And then the antagonist, Derek Hoffman, he goes into a pharmacological research program for money, basically to be a human guinea pig, to try that corporation's version of like Viagra. So that idea was also drawn from real life experience. I know your listeners are probably thinking I sound like old man Wagner because I'm going back to the 90s. But in the 90s, when I was doing one Broken Hope album after another for Metal Blade Records, death metal back then for my band at least, it wasn't like it was a career. It didn't, I'd have to be on tour all year to actually make money, right? So I always tell people when I was in my 20s and the 90s, and I'm dating myself here, I did have a pot to piss in, basically. I did have a job, as I told you, as a logistics shipping manager, but I always, barely made ends meet. And I was on a mailing list for a company called Abbott Labs, which is a worldwide known major pharmaceutical company. And they actually are based in the northern burbs of Chicago. And they had a mailing list you could get on for their pharmacological research programs. And if you signed up and met the criteria, you could get accepted into the program to try some new drug they were developing that they needed FDA approval for. And before they got that approval, they had to see how it worked on people. And you can make a lot of money. And I remember one day I got a letter from Abbott Labs, and they had a new pharmacological research program, and they described what the program is for, what this new drug is, and what the criteria is that they're looking for in a person. And if you got that particular program paid like $3,000, and for me, that was a ton of money back then. It's still a significant amount of money now in 2026. But for me in my 20s, that was like, wow, I hit the lottery if I get this. So you had to stay in that program for a week. So what I did was I had a week vacation that I took off of work to do that program. So I had a paid vacation and I could enter this program and get paid $3,000 if I completed it. So I did get accepted in that. And that's where I learned firsthand what it's like to be in that program like that, where you either get the real experimental drug or placebo, and you do blood work and you have doctors around. And then you have a dorm like room setting. You can read, watch TV and whatever. And then every so often they're like, here's a cup. We want you to take this and, we're going to monitor you and see how you react. So these are little seeds that were planted in my head that all kind of came together to write Wretch. And I always tell people that ask, how do you write a story or get an idea or whatever? And I always say, what happens with me personally as a writer, it's always the question, what if? It always starts there. What if this happened? What if these types of people cross paths? What would happen? Things like that. So Wretch was basically me going, what if a sociopathic, steroid abusing, psycho went into a pharmacological research program, big pharma we're talking about, right? And like Pfizer and stuff. What if a guy like this was accepted into a program to try a new experimental drug and a pharmacological research program, but something went terribly wrong, like the reaction to that drug, what would happen? And that's how it started. And I had always remembered these people and things in my past that, I just always had in my head, unforgettable people, right? And the what if question. And that is kind of how it all started. That's how Wretch really, the seed was planted, and where it started was that what if thing with a steroid abusing sociopath who's 6'5", goes into a pharmacological research program, in this case for a new experimental ED drug like Viagra or Cialis, and something goes horribly wrong. What happens after that? That's where it all started for me.
So this idea basically has been within you for the last 30 or so years, and you finally
Yeah, in
together.
one way, shape, or form, it has. And I wrote the first draft of Wretch probably, I'd say, gosh, it's been three or 4 years that I actually started Wretch, if not longer. And when I say that, you or your listeners might be like, well, why didn't you, finish Wretch and have it out already? Well, I had a couple other books and things that got in my way. I had a novel called Rabbit Heart that was pretty much in its final stages. And I'm like, I want to get this off my plate. So Rabbit Heart got published. And then in between books, Broken Hope was going full steam at the time. So we were doing tours, around the world and whatnot. And I'd always return to Wretch, despite Rabbit Heart and Broken Hope and everything. I'd keep working on Wretch and revising it. And then while I was focused on that, another book got in my way that was really important. And it's a book that I had never written before, like this type of book, because it's nonfiction. So I'm primarily, into dark fiction, dark fiction novelist. And whether it's splatterpunk horror or dark crime, like Wretch, it's a mishmash of those genres. That's my style. But I got approached by a famous chef named Chef Curtis Duffy to write his memoir. And his story, like his true life story, blew me away. One of the blurbs we got, I'll tell you this, sums up Fireproof Memoir of a Chef perfectly. Famous author Peter Blauner, who gave us a blurb and read Fireproof, had said, this is like Sons of Anarchy meets Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. And that's exactly on point with Curtis Duffy's story. I'm a story guy. Like if I'm into an effed up, twisted idea that I really can't let go of, I gotta write it. And with Curtis Duffy doing a nonfiction book, his story captivated me and had me hooked, right? So I'm like, I want to write this book. So I interviewed Curtis Duffy and probably did about 50, 60 hours of interviews, transcribed it all. And then boom, I did Fireproof. And that came out last summer. I believe it was August 2025. And that book took, a couple of years to write between the interviews and as you're interviewing someone like Curtis Duffy, he's earning more, Michelin awards, and he builds a new restaurant and this and that. So I'm writing Fireproof and keep it up with Curtis Duffy and trying to bring it up to speed. Meanwhile, Wretch is on the side waiting for me. So once Fireproof came out last August, I returned to Wretch and went through a few more revisions and got a publishing deal for Wretch, same publisher that did Fireproof, that is Sky Publishing. And Steve Wands, he's the guy who gave me my book deals. And finally, Wretch last year was actually signed to a publishing deal. And it just took between, lining up firms, if you will, our anchors as a writer and publisher, book distributor, the publicity firm. They work together, and their campaigns to get books set up take months, 6 to 9 months just to set up a book, promote it, get it in stores, stocked. All that stuff takes time. So Wretch finally is coming out next week, as I'm doing this interview with you. February 24th, 2026 is the release date. So I'm delighted this baby is finally seeing the light of day, because it has been in my life for years. And to your point, those ideas for the book have been with me for a long time. But here we are. Wretch is here.
Yeah, what got me like, you're very so productive with everything that you do, and time management is always a question. Like, because you're involved between music to film to writing, everything. What is your typical writing schedule look like for yourself to get everything done that you need?
Well, that's a great question. And I have done, numerous things that I wanted to do in life. I try to, encourage and inspire other people to make the most of your life, right? I will tell people, hey, look, we get one lap around the track, and make it count in life, and do what you want. And I, aside from writing, music's a big part of my life because of Broken Hope and my death metal band, and Earthburner, my grindcore band. I always was, I've been playing music since I was 16, being a guitar player and a lyricist. And that's a big part of my life. And I was always writing since I was a kid, like writing stories and stuff. So I've always had music and writing books, all that together. But as time's gone on, there's other things I was interested in, like film, for example. And I made a media company called Aphotic Media, and we make films. We've done TV series we've created. And when I mention these things, people might go, we haven't seen them yet. The thing I've learned with being on a huge learning curve in the film business is you'll get companies that'll buy stuff like, say, Netflix and whatnot, who acquire films or TV series. And a lot of times they just sit on a shelf somewhere with Netflix and they don't come out. Or other production companies, want to buy whatever you wrote and then develop it on their own, and it'll come out later. So with Aphotic Media, I've had a lot of success, and I have 2 documentary films that I wrote and produced. I think should be coming out later this year. Waiting to see. I really hope they do. But with all that, the bands, the film production company, and writing full time, it takes a lot of time out of my day. And with my writing schedule, what I try to do now is get up, hey, as early as I can, let the dogs out. My wife and I have 2 English bulldogs, so let them out, have my breakfast, and get the writing, working on whatever work in progress there is. And then as the day goes on, I got to do all this other stuff. So I try to get like my writing, like a book or a short story, that work in progress I mentioned, get more words written. And I'll aim for like 1,000 words a day, depending on what I'm working on. And if I have a deadline, I really am under pressure and I got to get it done. But what I found out is that I really love the things that I've done with music and with film, and even having a small publishing press. This stuff is all things I wanted to do in life. But what I learned is having so many projects at once can be overwhelming. And my main passion now is writing books. And when I don't get enough time with that because of things getting in my way, films and band stuff. It, for me personally, it kind of like bothers me. I'm like, damn it, I want to be writing right now, but you know, I got these other obligations. And one thing I take pride in is not doing anything half-assed. You know, whether say Broken Hope is playing a festival, I want to make sure we have the great production and one of our great sound men, and we put on a great show. Or if I do a film, I want to make sure that it's not like anything that's been done before. It's original and it also has impact, right? And the same with my books and everything. So that said, all these projects, these things that I've done and want to do, and I see them through. And now in 2026, I want to see my films take off and maybe pull back on the film stuff a bit. And with the band stuff, we're in a place where we pick and choose our own battles. You know, we don't tour 10 months out of the year or anything. It's not a career. So we pick and choose our own battles. So we'll do festivals or maybe a week tour with whether it's Broken Hope or Earthburner, and that's about it. And I'm just getting to a point where I was hoping I'd be, which is to write full time. And when I say write full time, just to your question, get up early, do what I got to do, and then get in my office here and just write my butt off. And the beauty of that is, one, I've learned my limitations, right? And I know I want to write full time, which is a great feeling. And with having bands and you know, production company and stuff, I've got to answer to like 20, 25 people. And that gets aggravating. It's like too much, you know. And for me, I'm just like, okay, Jeremy, you're at a point where you're good being a solitary writer. That's what you want to do. Work on getting all this other crap done and write full time. So that's what I'm doing now. You know, I got my projects, my other stuff on their way, and trying to stick to that full time writing thing. Again, early morning, get to at least 1,000 words, and then I can go on and do whatever I want the rest of the time.
So here's I guess, a tough question to ask. With now books being your primary focus, is there any potential point for new music to come out with Broken Hope or Earthburner?
Yeah, I've got a folder on Dropbox where I've got, I think, about 6 new Broken Hope songs, and I've probably got I think about four or five Earthburner songs written on guitar. So what I do is I've got home studio, and when I get riffs coming out of me, you know, when I'm playing and writing, I make sure I record everything so I don't forget what the hell riff I came up with, and I video it too. So when I focus on music, writing a new album, I just keep working on those riffs till I have one song after another after another. And when I say I've got, say, 6 new Broken Hope songs written and 4 or 5 Earthburner songs, those are complete. And it always starts with a couple of riffs and then a couple more riffs until I've got, you know, intro, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, end, start to finish. So those are complete songs. And then what I want to do is get at least for each band, you know, a good 10 to 12 songs written. And with Broken Hope, I've always been the chief lyricist. So I got to write lyrics for all those songs too, which takes time. Earthburner, our singer Devin Swank from Sang with Sugabog, He writes all the Earthburner lyrics, so I don't have to do that. But I get asked every other day direct messages or comments on Broken Hope and Earthburner social media. When the hell are you going to have a new album out? When are you going to have a new album out? And I know it's been a while for Broken Hope, especially it's a number of years. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping this year we get a new album written and lyrics done, and hopefully start recording something at the end of this year. And Earthburner, when we did our debut album, God, I had that Earthburner album written already for a while. It was just waiting, and I got the right lineup. And within weeks, when I had the lineup, we already were in the studio and did the album. It was really quick, and that album came out about a year and a half ago. So I want to get another Earthburner album done, but again, only so much time in the day, and again, I don't do anything half-assed. I want to make sure every song really, pummels the listener and has impact and whatnot. So for anyone listening that's waiting for Broken Hope and Earthburner, I know you're out there. We do have you in our heads, and we want albums on as much as you, but we want to make sure it's right. So to answer your question, after all that, we are working on new material and really, really hope to get something recorded soon.
Awesome. And so back to Wretch, and like what filmmakers or authors inspire you?
Um, Gosh, there's a number. Like with filmmakers, I really have always admired like David Cronenberg, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese. So films that they've done, I really, really just love in a cinematic way. And they're the types of films, whether it's body horror like Cronenberg style, or even not body horror by Cronenberg, like A History of Violence. I thought was a incredible film, and Coppola, The Godfather, 1 and 2, and Scorsese films. I'm in the organized crime and all this stuff. So those movies and filmmakers always appeal to me because I like the stories, the way they're done, and it's always like their voice. And with books, it's the same thing. Authors I love, I started out with Stephen King, thanks to my mom, and Peter Straub, these horror guys when I was a kid. That really inspired me. Peter Benchley's Jaws, the paperback, was the first adult novel that I ever read. So I'd say like those guys were early influences. And then I got into authors like Cormac McCarthy. I just love Cormac McCarthy. You talk about a voice. It's like a band. If you heard, whether it's Slayer to Morbid Angel, you go, oh, that's Morbid Angel, that's Slayer, because that voice, that tone is what I'm talking about. And it's the same with authors. I know when I'm reading Cormac McCarthy book or Thomas Harris, he's another favorite of mine, big inspiration. Same thing. Like it's like, wow, these guys, they have a voice, and the content, the books they write. Peter Blauner, another example. I love all his books. These are books that are a bit dark. They don't always have happy endings, but it's like their style. Like I know it's their voice, and those are authors that really, really have appealed to me in a big way, and have had an impact on me.
My last question for you is there anything that you just want the readers to take away from Wretch?
Yeah, I want to give them one hell of a ride through the hot and bloody streets of Chicago in Wretch, and be entertained, shocked, and have a takeaway of, God damn, Wretch was one hell of a read. I hope everyone checks it out. If you're into splatterpunk horror and dark crime, you're going to get it from yours truly, Jeremy Wagner.